It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome back to another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. Back shotgun with me, Alan Saunders. Big shout out to Nick Faribault joining me yesterday. Alan, I don't know if you saw, but Nick Faribault was doing his first actual afternoon drive yesterday because he was driving back from Pitt's Pro Day. So he was doing the in-season Alan Saunders impersonation on an actual afternoon drive.
You know, I was thinking the other day, I kind of missed it. I did enjoy it. And also, this is behind the curtain a little bit, but our numbers have been better. You know, there's a lot of regular listeners now that maybe don't remember the in-season
that's true
afternoon drive. You know, we've got the audience keeps growing, and so some people will be like, wait, he's in a car? Oh yeah, it is a drive themed deal here. But yeah, that'll be coming up. I don't know if we'll do it during OTAs or not. I would guess probably not. Those happen in the morning. So I'll probably be home before we record after OTAs. And then I'll be back on a baseball field or somewhere, training camp.
Yeah.
Man, hard to believe we haven't even been doing this a year. It seems like we've covered so much ground. And really excited so far for the response and happy to keep it going. But got some exciting times coming up. Just wrapped up some exciting times. Finished the old NFL owners meeting there, so we can
put it on the board.
There we
go. Another edition.
One more up there.
Yeah, there we go. But to that point, like you said, you know, for everybody that has been new, just recently found the show, we obviously appreciate you becoming part of the audience. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you know every time the new episode is posted or any of the content that gets posted to the channel. Alan, I wanted to kind of take a look at what we've learned over the last week or so, you know, as we get more and more information on the Steelers trail towards the NFL draft. And I say trail because, you know, typically with the Steelers, you can kind of follow the path along, get a look at where they are going to in terms of the pro days and have a pretty good idea, you know, who they bring in for the 30 visits and get a pretty good idea of the direction that this team would like to go. So, you know, as we sit here now, less than a month out at this point on March 28th, time of recording this, how do you feel like you have a sense of where the Steelers want to go? Do you feel like you are starting to get a clearer picture on the direction that the Steelers could go at pick number 20?
I think there's like one big thing out there that I still don't understand, and that's their plan at center. Everything outside of center is starting to make sense, right? I mean, we got the news that Amarius Mims is coming in did come in for a top 30 visit, and I don't know, like they don't want us to call them top 30 visits, but that's what everybody calls them, so I'm just going to call them that. It's a pre-draft visit. They get 30 of them. They're not necessarily their top 30 prospects, whatever. He's one of their top 3 prospects, I would venture to say.
Might be number 1.
Yeah, top 3 visit for Georgia tackle Amarius Mims. And I think you put him with J.C. Latham as 2 guys that now they've been to their pro day. They met with at the combine at that position that are options at 20. Taliesin Fuaga is a guy they met with at the Senior Bowl. I mean, I think he's probably gone at 20. Like, there are only so many players that are going to be available. I think, you know, they're learning more about the way the league is going to value guys. And I know they're doing due diligence, right? They went to Michigan. They talked to J.J. McCarthy. When they went to Georgia, they talked to Brock Bowers, right? So, like, they're paying attention to guys that maybe are not expected to be there, but it sure does feel like they've got a pretty narrow focus. I know we've talked a little bit about, you know, whether this GM and head coach at the first round picks pro day streak was going to continue. And I've laid out the case over the last couple of weeks for why I think it may not this year. I think there are legitimate first round pick options whose pro day they didn't go to. Quinyon Mitchell, Jackson Powers Johnson, Cooper DeJean. And I think there were reasonable reasons to not do that, those, you know, at those pro days. So I don't think we should necessarily cross those guys off the list. But, man, it sure feels like tackle in the first round, wide receiver in the second round is the way these visits and this interest is really, really lining up. I mean, there's some noise in there, right? Like they went to Clemson, which Nate Wiggins is kind of the one first round pick. So I think corner we probably still have to consider. But
At Alabama, Ike Taylor's the one that went through the corner drills with the guys, right?
Right. Yeah. But Ike Taylor's not their cornerbacks coach, and he's
No,
not even their
no.
second cornerbacks coach. He's more like about the third tier
What was
option.
the representation for the Steelers there? Like, what and who else's pro day was that day that they would have been
At
at?
Alabama, I mean, they sent a whole plane full of guys to Alabama. So it was not I mean, they literally chartered a plane and flew to Alabama, and there were just a ton of guys there. So it was not a space thing, if they wanted. I honestly, I'm not sure I've seen Grady Brown anywhere. Has he been to any of these?
I haven't seen his name attached to any pro days at this point.
Right. So I think we wrote Alabama's list. I'm trying to find where that is on the site here. SteelersNow.com. Go check it out. It's got all kinds of good information. Sometimes I even learn things there. Mike Tomlin, Omar Khan, Terrell Austin, Dan Rooney, Ike Taylor. Probably Zach Crockett. We didn't write that, but he's the area scout for the SEC. So my guess is he was there too.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, I was just curious because we talked about, maybe Wiggins is in place. They got to keep some of those corners. Kool-Aid, obviously, and Terry and Arnold potentially, depending on, if there is, because I agree with the tackle thing. Like, we got a comment recently that people want to see us either do a mock draft live on here or do separate ones and see which one people like more. And I agree. If I'm doing one right now, it's probably tackle in the first round in the most likely situation. But for whatever reason, if there is like a huge run on tackles right before pick 20, then where do you think like the next thing would be? Would it be corner? Because that would mean somebody like Terry and Arnold or a Quinyon Mitchell fell to them if there was a huge run on tackles.
Wiggins, Kool-Aid, it seems like the more of the rest of the interest is at corner or honestly wide receiver, right? I mean, at the combine, they did formal interviews with all the first round wide receivers. They brought in Rome Odunze, Brian Thomas, Keon Coleman, Troy Franklin, Ladd McConkey, A.D. Mitchell. So, wide receiver seems like it's first round or second round or third round. Obviously, the tackle guys, I mean, they're bringing in some later guys. They're bringing in Mac and Salvis from Pitt. They're bringing in Javon. What's his name from from Georgia State? I'm blanking on his Travis Glover is his name for top 30 visits. And they did like a combine formal with Blake Fisher, I believe. So they're sort of spread around a tackle, but it's a lot of early guys. Like the combine formals were Lathan Mims and Troy Fatanu. The 30 visits are Mims and Fuaga. They met with Fuaga and Guyton at the Senior Bowl. There's a concentrated batch of interest there. And then, I do think they're interested in Zach Frazier a lot. I think they're interested in Cedric Van Pran. I assume they're interested in Jackson Powers Johnson. I mean, Mike Tomlin really didn't send anybody to Graham Barton's pro day. But who went? Pat Meyer went there today.
No, it was Arthur Smith there. Pat Meyer was at Washington. With
okay.
Troy Fatanu, obviously.
So you get an assistant either way. I mean, I don't know. I think center and guard, or I think center is on the board, but it is not nearly the sort of concentrated interest that we see at tackle.
Yeah, that was kind of that's what I was going to bring up next. Was it's hard to understand what the path is with center, just because we're not seeing like Tomlin, Omar, Pat Meyer all in one place watching Graham Barton or Jackson Powers Johnson
now Pat Meyer was at Jackson Powers Johnson's pro day, but Omar and Mike weren't. Now it was the first day of free agency, so I assume that's why Omar didn't go, but Mike could have gone. And it's not like Oregon has one guy. It's not like, oh, well, we're not going to go to Iowa. Cooper DeJean's not running and there's nobody else to see. Now, Quinyon Mitchell and there's nobody else at Toledo. Right? Like Oregon has like 6 guys that are going to get drafted and guys that Kyrie Jackson, corner, absolutely could be a fit for the Steelers on day 2. Bo Nix, I mean, I assume could be a fit for the Steelers. Like there's certainly Bucky Irving is a running back. Troy Franklin, a wide receiver. Like there's definitely Brandon Dorlus is a defensive tackle I really like. There are multiple multiple draft options from Oregon that make sense for the Steelers. So for them to not even send Mike Tomlin there, I don't know. It's certainly not a significant feeling of interest the way I have it tackle. And look, could they just be throwing us a curveball? Yeah, they could, but that's never been their MO. They've never really been shy about hiding who they're interested in and who they like, and they don't always get to take that guy. I mean, Mims could certainly go ahead of them, but it sure feels like that's the direction they're leaning at tackle at first round, wide receiver sometime in rounds 1, 2, and 3, and center. I don't know. I'm just like the interest at center is not overwhelming. I just see the gaping hole in the depth chart and just have to assume that they're interested in center more than they're letting on.
Right. Yeah. And so this is going to be the second cycle now for this group with Omar and Andy, but I was just wondering, like, I don't know. I guess maybe we won't know until we watch this year play out and then try to see how next year compares to the first two. But I was wondering if maybe they learned something about their process in year one that they want to do differently in year two, and there's a more conscious effort keeping the cards closer to the vest, if you will.
It definitely seemed like they're just not going back to the well on guys as often. I know they like Quinyon Mitchell. They scout him during the season a bunch. They were all over him at the Senior Bowl. But then they didn't do a formal interview with him at the Combine. They didn't go to his pro day. I mean, they sent somebody, I think it was Dan Colbert. And so far, he hasn't come in for a top 30 visit. Now, we've only learned the identities of maybe 10 of those 30, so there's plenty to go. But like, that's a guy I know they're interested in, and they just have not like hammered that interest. Zach Frazier is a guy I know they're interested in, but they have not really made that interest obvious like they have some guys like Amari Mims. Now look, Amari Mims is a player that has a very difficult projection to the NFL. Like, he's dealing with, and he's dealt with an injury, and that injury also caused perhaps the most significant lack of experience I can remember in a draft prospect. Like, have the Steelers ever in their entire history of the franchise drafted a guy in the first round that has only played 8 college games? I would venture to say that's never happened before, right? So this is certainly a guy that you have more work to do than a player like Zach Frazier, who's a multi-year starter at the second closest Power 5 school to your home base. Like, I'm sure they've seen a lot more of Zach Frazier over the years than they have of Amari Mims, and so they have more work to do in this process to catch up and feel like they know as much about that guy. But also, the Steelers have been hammering Georgia for years. It's not like they were just learning about this guy this fall. How many former Bulldogs do they have on the team? It's a bunch. I don't know. Is it 4? Obviously it's been 3 in the last 2 years, and Darnell Washington, Broderick Jones, and George Pickens. But I think they have another one too somewhere. They certainly are no stranger to who is good and who is coming from the University of Georgia.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and how much of that is the reason why, like, because I was just saying, like, we've talked a lot about them not necessarily revealing their cards in terms of their interest. I would say Mims is the one that is the most clear to see, though. Like, so is it just because of the Georgia connection, or why do you think that that's been the case?
Well, I mean, I guess I'm sort of speculating that it is because they feel like they need to learn more about him, right? Where like the evaluation is not as clear as it is a player like Zach Frazier, where they can maybe afford to say, you know what, I think we know everything there is to know here, and all we're going to do by continuing to show our hand or continue to show obvious interest is tip our hand, right? I mean, there becomes a point of diminishing return where you've already talked to this guy so much, you've already learned so much about this guy, you have so much tape, you have so many relationships. I mean, Blaine Stewart was a Steelers assistant coach for 4 years and is assistant coach at West Virginia now. Like, they've got all the info they need on Zach Frazier. What are they going to learn by doing a formal interview with him at the Combine, for example? Like, to show even more obvious interest in a player when I just don't feel like they need to. And so, but at Mims with his flags, I think probably is a guy where they felt like they needed more of those. And so I kind of understand it in a way. I'm kind of, on one hand, if you said, who are they going to pick? I would say right now, I think the most likely candidate is Marius Mims. But I also would say it's kind of feeling like the end of this idea where we can just lean on the obvious candidates too, right? Like I want to say, I want to give both answers. Like, I still think Marius Mims is the most obvious choice, but I also think that they're making their interest less obvious than they have in the past.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with all that. Like the Mims thing for sure. I feel like if somebody asked me right now to give a prediction on who it's going to be in the first round, Mims is my pick. And then like you get to round 2, and a lot of the names that they brought in wide receiver wise, you would probably have to lock in at 51. And then I'm really going to be wondering what the plan is at center.
I don't know. Maybe
I mean, because like Ricky Pearsall, Malachi Corley, Xavier Legette,
they did Wilson's pro day, the Jermaine Burton's pro day. Like these are all second round picks, probably.
The other 2 Washington guys that aren't Odunze. I mean, maybe one of them gets to the 3rd round. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
maybe McMillan. He's more of a slot guy. I don't know, but yeah. Oh, by the way, the other Georgia player, Justin Fields. Yeah, 4.
I was wondering if we were counting him as okay. Got it.
I was like, I know there's another one there. Okay, yeah, there you go. Obviously transferred to Ohio State, and then, but yeah. So I don't know. I think they've done a little bit better job of trying to hide their intentions. I don't think it's as easy to predict. I also don't think it's as easy to predict because they have this one gaping need at center. They have some other positions where it's pretty clear they need to make some kind of move, but they've sort of given themselves options in this draft class, and the one gaping need, it doesn't seem like they're focused on. Like when they didn't have a running back, we all knew they were drafting Najee Harris. It was pretty obvious. This draft, they don't have a center, but it does not at all feel obvious that they're going to draft Jackson Powers Johnson if he's there at 20. So I think part of that is just confusion, right? I mean, and I don't know. Maybe there's another plan at center that is not obvious to us right now, but I don't see what it is. It's definitely bizarre that they just have no one at that position, and that they've done so much. And I want to talk about this more too, but I mean, it's to the point where they're like checking depth boxes at other positions. They're sending the 3rd quarterback. They got 5 wide receivers. They've got, backups on backups, and they don't have anyone to play center. It's nuts.
I mean, yes. So I was going to okay, prediction. Are they going to sign somebody else to play center before the draft?
I predict that they will acquire a center before the draft.
Okay.
Yes. Maybe it's a trade.
I guess I shouldn't say sign because I was going to say they could.
Omar did say that, and that would sort of explain why things are taking a while, if that's what he is trying to do. There are a couple guys who have been starters that got they signed a better player to replace them, but they're still under contract. Luke Fortner in Jacksonville, Liam Eichenberg in Miami. And so I could see one of those guys being attracted to them as a trade. It's
wild to me that Eichenberg's playing center now.
Yeah.
I remember when he was coming out of Notre Dame. I mean, I shouldn't say wild, but I thought maybe guard he would switch to, but I didn't see center.
Yeah.
When he was coming out of Notre Dame.
Yeah. I kind of thought he could play center. So I'm not really super surprised by that. Maybe they're going to trade for Liam and draft Tommy, get another set of brothers in here. Let's make that the segue. So I think when you're trying to do your mock draft, and maybe we'll do this tomorrow. Maybe we'll do one tomorrow. Do you want to try to do one tomorrow? As long as news doesn't happen.
Okay. Yeah. And if news does happen, if news does happen, it's easy to say we'll shoot for a mock draft Monday. Obviously that sounds better anyway, but if we have the ability to do it tomorrow, we'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah. When you're doing your mock draft right now, I think where you focus after this. So this first group, tackle, center, wide receiver, corner, And I think maybe you could put defensive tackle in that group as well.
Mhm.
Maybe. Where it seems like these are positions they're interested in with those first 4 picks, right? The first, the second, and the 2/3. Those day 3 picks, I think, have really moved around a lot based on what they've done these last few days, right? I mean, we talked a lot about Spencer Rattler, Jordan Travis, Michael Pratt, Joe Milton, like those guys being potential options at quarterback, and then they go sign Kyle Allen.
Yeah.
I think they're now at a point where quarterback is like they don't have a 7th rounder, maybe at the end of the 6th round, or I think more likely an undrafted guy. You know,
Right.
I think that's more likely where you're going with quarterback at this point. Also, I think all those quarterbacks are bad, and I'm not like I think that was a good decision. I think I think quarterback is so overdrafted in this draft, and that it's going to be hard to find a lot of value at that position anywhere. And I like Kyle Allen, so I think he's a good podcast, by the way. You should check that.
With QB guru Jordan Palmer, who works with a lot of quarterbacks coming into the league. Is he working with any of the ones that are coming in now? Because Drake May, I thought was.
I don't know that. I'll have to do some research.
Okay. Anyway,
so I think you can kind of cross quarterback off. And running back, we talked about how they have this upcoming decision with Najee Harris. They have Jaylen Warren entering his last year before he becomes a restricted free agent. And, you know, what they want to do with the future of that position, I thought maybe they would want to bring in someone with some upside. And they signed Cordell Patterson right after the kick return rule. I mean, it all makes sense. He's one of the best kick returners out there. I think it checks a lot of boxes. Does it prevent them from drafting a running back late? I don't know. I think it certainly knocks it down the board for me in terms of like what they might be looking for. There are still some late running backs I really like, but I don't know how much of a fit they are. I mean, you're probably not going to dress 4. So at that point, you're drafting a guy just as a redshirt year. Not that they haven't done that before, certainly in the 6th round or later, but I mean, I think it certainly changes the level of need there pretty significantly.
Yeah, I had a 30 with Dylan Johnson, the running back out of Washington, which maybe they're getting a look at today as well. It's Pat Meyer and Mark Bruner that are there. That's the only representation we know of. But I mean, yeah, other than that, that was really the only running back that I had seen them linked to, but I thought for sure they could take
Will
one on day 3.
Out to dinner before the Clemson
that's right.
Pro Day.
Yeah. Okay.
So there was that one. And then Blake Corum, they were at the Michigan Pro Day.
You know I don't know what you think about him. Kamari Vidal out of Troy. I watched him and I felt like I was watching like another Jaylen Warren. He is very Jaylen Warren-like, similar build.
I was very excited to see him at the Senior Bowl, and I was a little bit underwhelmed. The guy
I don't know how about Senior Bowl, but I'm just talking.
The guy I do think I like is Isaac Garendo from Louisville.
Yeah,
he is a very Jaylen Warren and just an Arthur Smith zone scheme kind of running back that I think would be
near perfect RAS. I mean, he's
I like Ray Davis a lot from Kentucky. He's not as athletically dominant. You know, he's more of a like a just get the yards that are there kind of guy, but I like him a lot too. There are a bunch of backs in the late rounds that I would take. I just don't know if they're going to feel like they want a 4th one there. Defensive tackle. I mean, they're bringing in Braden Fiske on a 30 visit. They're bringing in Christian Boyd. So they're showing some obvious interest in that position. They went to the Clemson Pro Day where there's Ruke Orhoro and Tyler Davis, the greatest name combination in all of sports when you have 2 guys who you could just it's like the Key and Peele skit where it's like the one guy is like Ken Smith from BYU inside the the full the full a ridiculous name sketch. Yeah. Those guys, they went to their pro day. I don't know. I think but they signed Dean Lowry. They re-signed Montravius Adams. That's the whole list. I mean, they're bringing the whole room back. Do they need another defensive tackle?
Yeah, I mean, I would. So like, it's kind of like a short-term band-aid right now. I mean, I like Monty Adams as a player, but like long-term, I still don't think that they have like that dude to pair with Keanu Benton as like a legit long-term piece. So like, if a guy were to fall, that I guess feels like that for them, I think that like there's still the need for that. But in terms of like a guy to play right now, no. Like, I don't think that you add a guy just to add a guy to the room.
Yeah,
Which
I think
like another guy that they brought in, Darius Robinson, which kind of scares me because he's also like a tweener. Didn't have the best success with that with the Marvin Leal. Obviously, Robinson I think is a better player, but I'm just saying, and not like, do we trust them to do the right things in terms of those guys where you're really not sure, like, is he a D end or what exactly is he?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like an early or not at all kind of position, right? Where if you get a guy that
Right.
looks like a
Yeah.
future piece, it makes sense, but you don't need to they don't need a body, right? Signing
Mhm.
Dean Lowry means they don't need a
That's what I
body.
was trying to say. Yeah.
If
Yeah.
they can find a guy who seems like he's a future part of the rotation, great, do it, but they don't need a body. And so when you start to go through those day 3 picks, it's like there are actually kind of few positions where they really do like start to need bodies. Like they need bodies at corner. They need bodies. They probably could use another safety. And I think inside linebacker is still on the table. I mean, we saw Aaron Curry at the Ohio State Pro Day where there was Eichenberg and Steel Chambers, which, come on, I mean, his name is Steel Chambers. He played his
Right. He's
college
a fit just
football
for
at
that.
Ohio State. Like he just belongs. And then also at Kentucky with Trevin Wallace. And so I think that they're definitely still interested in adding to the linebacker position. I actually did a mock the other day, and I got Cedric Gray from North Carolina with like a 6th round pick, and I felt very good about that.
Jeez.
And
Yeah.
like I think that's a position where we could still see them add for 2 reasons. One, I mean, look, I really like Mark Robinson, but he was not ready to go when they kind of needed him to be ready to go this past year. And I certainly don't think he's um earned a level of oh, don't touch my roster spot. You know what I mean? Like
Sure. Yeah.
and then the health of Cole Holcomb still seems like it's up in the air whether he's going to be ready to go for the start of the season or not. And if he's not, you need at least one more then. And so I think linebacker kind of moves up that list for me. I think slot corner is definitely going to come from that group unless it comes early, if it's a guy like Wiggins or Lassiter in the 2nd round or something like that. But yeah, there are actually now kind of like it's kind of tough. Like where do you go position wise with those later picks? There are fewer obvious spots than there used to be.
Yeah. I mean, I almost wonder, like, is a double dip in there at all? Like,
I mean, they could use 2 wide receivers. There's no question about that.
which is funny to say, like, even with the number that they've added, it's you have George Pickens, and then you got a bunch of like wide
Well, they're
receiver
not
4
paying
types.
any of those guys
Right. Yeah.
anything that would really deter you from making a move. Um, you know, so do what you got to do. I think it seems like if they're going to go wide receiver in the 2nd round, it seems like most of those guys are more slot types. Guys like Pearsall, guys like Roman Wilson, guys like Malachi Corley, and so maybe you feel like you could take another guy if it's just a pure outside guy, if it's like Washington from Virginia or something like that, like just a straight up outside burner type. Honestly, wide receiver is really deep, but it's not like most of the depth is slot types. Like after you get through maybe like the first 2 or 3 rounds, you kind of run out of those big outside receivers. And so like Brendan Rice is probably like a 3rd round pick. He's a big guy. He's an X kind of type body. There aren't too many of those after him though, And so I think I have a hard time seeing them double dip because I feel like you just get a lot of the same. And also Quez Watkins and Calvin Austin are also that. And so like how many slot receivers does a team that doesn't use that many slot receivers really need? I don't know.
Yeah. I was wondering, like Cornelius Johnson at Michigan, when they saw Roman Wilson, if he interests them at all as like a late round flyer, 6'2", 212, tested really well, 9.41 RAS. Because yeah, like the guys that interest me on, in the later rounds, Javon Baker, Jalen Coker out of Holy Cross, like those guys 6'1". I don't know where they're going to align at the next level. But to your point, yeah, I think it's more about slot guys than outside guys as you go further down the board.
Yeah, like Jacob Cowing is very small.
Although, hey, Bub Means.
Luke McCaffrey, they love their NFL bloodlines. He's a small.
Yeah.
Anaya Smith from Texas A&M, his brother played in the NFL too. Not quite as famously as Luke McCaffrey's brother, obviously, but those two guys are right there. Probably around the 4th round, and I think they're slots. I think maybe if you want to stick with the Georgia guys, Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint could be an outside guy, maybe like more of a Deontay Johnson type, where it can kind of do either.
Apparently, there's some interest there too. I think it was put out.
They had a Zoom call with him. Yeah. And I don't know, Lidatrick Griffin from Mississippi State. I believe he was at the Shrine Bowl. He's a bigger guy on the outside too, much like Cornelius Johnson. I don't think he ran quite as well, but yeah, I mean, I think there's options there. I have a hard time seeing them double dip, but maybe they could. Maybe center is a day 3 thing, and I don't know, like the unknown with center. So let's say they trade for Liam Eichenberg, and he's just gonna start. Like, okay, I mean, he hasn't been great, but he's been playable. All of a sudden, now center becomes very plausible on day 3. You can find good centers all the way through the draft. Like, you do not need to draft center highly to get a good center. Jason Kelsey was a 6th round pick?
6th,
yeah. So, like, I mean, you can certainly get center anywhere. And so if they do make some kind of move at center, I think center now becomes a really a big focus for them on day 3. Guys like Bo Limmer from Arkansas, Tanner Bortolini from Wisconsin, Hunter Norzad from Penn State.
Yeah.
I really like that kid, man. I think he could be good. Like that Kingsley, and I'm gonna butcher his last name, Igekwan from Florida is a guy who's in there.
Another one that I've seen linked to the Steelers a little bit too. So actually, we should probably both brush up on that pronunciation just in case.
Yeah. I'll have to. Drake Nugent. They went to Michigan Pro Day, so he's a guy that I think we should probably consider a possibility. I think there's some guys out there that they could take if that's the way they want. Mason McCormick from South Dakota State. I really like him. I think he's a good player. Probably more of a guard than a center, but I don't know. We'll see. So he reminds me of BJ Finney. Like, just when I met him, I was like, you are BJ Finney. Like, you have his look, his personality, and you kind of play like him. Like, it's kind of uncanny. So I think they would be just fine with another one of those, especially if it's
I got to be honest. I wasn't expecting to jump on today's Steelers Afternoon Drive and get a BJ Finney shout out on the show, but hey,
you gotta play some deep cuts sometimes. You can't just talk about Kenny Pickett every week. You gotta make some variety here.
Yeah, there you go. Great conversation. Excited for tomorrow, unless news drops, to finally do a mock draft for you guys. You guys have been asking me about it. We've been getting tweets, comments, asking when it's going to happen. Hopefully tomorrow we will do a mock draft on here for you, and we can see how this is going to play out. Let's preface by, I want to ask you this before we get into tomorrow and start going through this. Are we going to be open to trades, or do we want to stick and pick?
I think if you're trying to mock the con artist, you got to be open to trades. Like,
I agree.
On.
Okay. All right.
This is a guy that, like, I think, like, was the master deal maker at his elementary school lunch table. He's the guy that traded out some broccoli and ended up getting some Twinkies back. Like, he was making all the moves. He's always making all the moves. You can't lock yourself into no trades when you're talking about Omar Khan.
Omar, how'd you get 2 snack packs? Don't ask.
Walking down the hallway with 6 chocolate milks.
All right. Well, until tomorrow, Alan, tell the people they can find you
at @Saunders_PGH, PGH Steelers Now, SteelersNow.com. And that's about it.
Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell here. Hit us in the comments.
Hold on. Big shout out to Brandon Rossai, our esteemed voiceover specialist, for being named one of the backup public address announcers to the Pittsburgh Pirates this season. Super fired up for Brandon. Super fired up for that. Can't wait to hear him get after it at PNC Park this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Every time that you guys watch or listen to an episode, it's his voice bringing in. You hear his voice before ours on every
Yes,
single
that's
episode.
right.
He's the one
That's right.
bringing you in. So hit us in the comments, and you know what? Let's get some love for Brandon in the comments as
Heck
well.
yeah.
Congratulations to Brandon for that. Leave us a 5-star review if you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. I am Zachary Smith, PGH, for Alan Saunders and myself. Thanks for jumping in. Take another ride with us on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.